My talk is going to actually kind of come from some experience that I had trying to build out an app that was built on top of GPT 3.5 and 4. If you ask Sam Altman, like where in the short term AI is going to kind of have the biggest impact in the world, one of the examples he's consistently uses is how AI can help our nation's best and brightest, the top scientists, to make grant applications easier. Basically, and he's right. Like the majority of scientists today in the United States and most of the world, they spend just a crazy amount of time applying for grants. And that may not necessarily be the case in this building, but I assure you that it is a fact of life almost everywhere within academia. Upwards of 50% of a researcher's time is not spent doing the core research, but trying to figure out how to fund it. And this is a project that I got off the ground a little over a year ago called Granted AI. And originally this was to help my wife apply for some federal funding. When we started putting GPT-4 to the test of like, hey, write this grant for her, the output sucked. Like the output was like really bad. And so from my perspective, as someone who has increasingly become kind of evangelical about these recent advances in AI, I started putting my head down thinking about like what could we do to make this output better? And then the reality is, after probably about 6 months of kind of development, and ingesting a tremendous amount of grant data and then coming up with a really like a pretty clever custom RAG system on FICE, and then eventually building out kind of a recurrent looping system that enables the AI to essentially evaluate and reason about the grants. We got something that kind of works. And I think the thing that I was going to talk about for this talk was kind of the architecture that ended up really working. You can actually find it on GitHub, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. But the idea is as someone who has served on NSF grant committees before, like I can recognize caricatures of like a typical grant evaluator, like a persona. And you could imagine one, like, I am a 63-year-old white cantankerous computer science professor who has tenure and thinks my research is extraordinary, and yet my competitor's research is kind of overrated and garbage, right? Yeah, you can create these different types of personas based on reality or perhaps not, but from my perspective, I ended up kind of having a few people in mind when I coded this up, and so you kind of spin up these 6 different instantiations of GPT-4. And then I gave it that first draft of the grant, right, that had been written, the grant that sucked. And what I tasked these 6 independent agents to do was to shit on it. I mean, tell me all the reasons why this grant is garbage. But then you don't come back to me until you can kind of unanimously come up with a stacked rank list of all the reasons this grant should not be funded. And so through that process, you then get back essentially a list of things to change, right? And then you feed that back into the original model. And then you have this kind of reoccurrent loop that basically keeps getting the grant improving. And one of the things that I was concerned about was just kind of the latency associated with this. And so we kind of used 3.5 turbo and 4 in different ways. But the real kind of eye-opening thing was that as long as you tell users that, hey, this can take up to 25 minutes, this process, people are okay with it. So like, I think that there really is this opportunity to sort of kind of transcending this notion of like, throw something at the AI gives you something back, it's garbage, and you'd be like, oh, I guess AI sucks after all. The reality is that you can actually generate with this system quite good grants. I mean, we now have thousands of users who have applied for over $100 million worth of federal funding using this platform, which I think is, I'm proud of. Like, it's also a pretty nice lifestyle business. It was profitable within about 6 weeks of standing it up. So I was going to go into kind of the architecture and talk a little bit about the LangChain development, but instead, I got distracted by Twitter. Do people recognize this quote? How many people have seen this before? This was from an interview Sam did, I think maybe 4 or 5 days ago. No one's, one person. All right, well, so I'll read it to you. I didn't know whether or not this would be able to play video, so I'm gonna just do my best Sam Altman impression here. So fundamentally, there are 2 strategies to build on AI right now. Build assuming the models are not gonna get any better. So you kind of build a lot of little things on top of it. And that's kind of what Granted did, right? Like we got this Vice RAG type implementation. We started building this like little recurrent loops. So that we are, I think, in category 1. Or the category 2 is build assuming OpenAI will stay on the same trajectory and the model gets better over time. So it seems to me that 95% of the world should be betting on the latter category, but a lot of startups have been built on the former category. And then when we just do our fundamental job, which is making the model and tooling better, then you get the OpenAI killed my startup meme. And so if you're building on something if you're building something on GPT-4 that a reasonable observer would say, hey, if GPT-5 is as much better as GPT-4 over GPT-3 was, not because we don't like you, but because we have like a mission, we're going to steamroll you. And I really would like to kind of have the builders in the audience take something away from this talk, which is like, how do we not get steamrolled? Like the reality is, there are thousands of people using our product right now because GPT-4 sucks. Like it can't write the grant. And like we've figured out a way with a bunch of like essentially extra libraries to make that output better. But like there is no way GPT-5 is gonna suck like GPT-4, right? And so there is no way, from my perspective, that those thousands of researchers that are currently using our platform today will be using it once GPT-5 gets launched. And that's the conundrum from my perspective as a builder of like, what do we do, right? Like how can you future-proof your business? How can you make something more sustainable in a world where you can't see around the corner? And I would love, if anyone has an answer to that, I would love to hear it. So thank you.